Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And sound check, video check. Yay, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We are back live, so to speak. It's been a couple of days. I apologize. I missed you guys. Just been handling that pesky little thing called life. Just, yes, Windows. We know you're diligent. Talking to computers. Not so rare a thing, it seems. Let us continue with the second part of the treatise on spiritual contemplation, and the most venerable one in the 500-year period after the passing of Shakyamuni Buddha. It's a long title. But we are now in the part on the most venerable one. And we just finished, a couple of days ago, talking about the discussion on, the initial discussion on the Honzon, the object of worship. And again, with the argument on, where is Shakyamuni Buddha historically, that whole mess. And how is it we should see that Buddha is a nature or an inherent component of life itself? This is the question. I was just watching a PBS Spacetime video talking about information and the loss or gain thereof, and how physics often is misrepresented as being a mathematical or analytical language describing nature. Well, that's not true. That's not exactly right. And as Buddhists, it's much more satisfying to understand that science, in all mathematical or human endeavor to apply language to understand something, is exactly that. The great accomplishment of physics and mathematics and cosmology and all of that is the invention of a language of description to satisfy our human experience as observers of something. And when you put it in those terms, Buddhism slides into that category really, really well. Because try as science might for the last 100 years or so, what they keep coming up against is, as a challenge, is that ultimately when they're looking at quantum fields, the fundament from which we observe energy formations into various form, back and forth, into formation, loss of formation, formation being a roiling active thing that isn't a thing yet. And isn't that what Buddhism discovered 3,000 years ago? Is that fundamentally our idea of thingness is empty. Because fundamentally, it isn't in a seemingly willful way out of our frame of knowledge, out of our information. We can't say this is or isn't, because fundamentally it is either both or neither. And it's starting to sound like the language of Buddhism, isn't it? It doesn't exist, nor not exist, nor not exist, nor not ad nauseum. Because this formation zone is the compelling energies making associations which may seem to us random, but are actually quite influenced by the myriad conditions and tendencies around and within these amalgams of energy. And that can look a lot like choice or consciousness. And perhaps at a very primal level, a very rudimentary level, it is, which is what Nichiren is referring to when he's talking about Ichinen Sanzen, or original karma, or original enlightenment. That pseudo decision making or response to nature's, not nature like trees and so, but an endemic, an actual component, an emergent component of interactions of energies, has to produce, in a way, some conditioned response. And that response may be obliteration or manifestation. So I talk about that pre-formation or early formation, or that early nidana state, as the only English word I can find to identify it, as potential. It's not manifest, it's not an instantiation, it's a potential which is wide open to either manifest or subside, which is the fundamental nature of all things, including life itself, is this process of tendencies and conditions roiling around to either manifest a rock, a John, a Lucy, a dog, a tree. That's what we all are, is that process. And the fact that we can emerge a mind, a consciousness which sees over time a process we can identify as a thing, is bewilderingly amazing. But at the same time carries with it this tension of, as soon as we perceive it, we don't want to lose it. That attachment thing. Got it, got it, got it. And that got it produces all our stress and anxiety, because the truth is, you don't got nothing. It's in flow. You're just observing the process. As soon as you get to that, you start to understand the nature of all of it, and the fact, don't miss this, and the fact that's how it all started. This almost inconceivable interplay of energies struggling in the realm of formation as to whether to instantiate a potential or not. That is the field, if you will, of Buddha. But it's a misnomer to call that Buddha, because Buddha is the label we put on our observation of that reality. Just like physics, a language for us to once again use our intrinsic nature of identification so that we can solidify our understanding of something, get our mind around something, right? We give it a label. it's quixotic, because the very fact that we put a label on it means that we don't really understand. Because a label is identification, it's permanence, it's hanging on to. Yeah. So Nichiren understood this. He would read all of Shakyamuni's teachings and he would say, well, no wonder he had such difficulty getting this insight that we're all manifest of, which exists in our emergent mind, our observer, which is a temporary thing. Our knowledge of that innate, intrinsic nature of energy, manifesting formations, is something we can actually appreciate in our thingness universe. And our path through our thingness is our Gohanzon of that fundamental nature, Buddha. But our only place of Buddha-ness is our perceptive, instantiated observer, our mind. So don't just unravel that a little further. Buddha isn't something that exists throughout all time that we get access to from our minds. It's not outside of ourselves. You got to check that thinking, because we're so thingifying in our observations and our thinking that we think everything is something either on offer or that we get from outside of ourselves. Not so. Buddha is solely in your mind, because Buddha is the ability to understand this engine of life that is the entire universe and time-space itself. So why do we want to do that? Because through our experience of that truth, understanding the nature of all things, is our human key to unlock our attachment, our thingifying, our identifying, our ego to all of this formation. Like somehow either we own it or we're affected by it. When we get rid of the distinctions of me and you, that and this, and we understand that we're all that and this, constantly instantiating and enduring and disassembling, that it's just a big cycle of energy that we're all enthralled with, then our idea of ownership, losing, gaining, identity it's a temporary, perhaps even a useful carrier for what we really are, unattached from all of this stuff, part of all of this stuff, in a process of life that distinguishing this from that and me from you is kind of irrelevant. It's a manufactured, constructed concept from which all our experiences of stress and pain come from. And so that's a very unifying observation. It's not that that exists or doesn't exist. A lot of people make that mistake and it leads to nihilism. It's a full acknowledgement that everything, that every potential manifests, exists. Isn't that brilliant? Oh. And isn't it fascinating to see the variety of manifestations that are manifest, that are experienceable? Isn't that awesome? Isn't that non-threatening? It's just for now. It's just this moment, this moment, this moment, this moment, this moment. The 3,000 modes, the 3,000 existences, the 3,000 realms. Why realms? Because they're not specific things. They are scope of things, which are themselves empty, temporary. Simply, the only value of all the stuff of the universe is the experience of them, the formations. It's like a sparkler when you get them around the 4th of July or celebrations, right? With you light that little stick that looks like an incense, and then all these sparks fly in the air, and it's so wonderful to watch. But as soon as they're done sparking, everything is gone. Well, that doesn't mean they didn't exist. It just means they existed for a moment for us to observe. That is the nature of everything. So, if Microsoft will leave me alone, let's proceed. Question, what's your proof of that? Answer, it is stated in the 10th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the teacher of the Dharma. This sutra has aroused much hatred and jealousy even during the lifetime of the Buddha. How much more can this be expected after his death? So here was Shakyamuni teaching this stuff, and everybody latched onto, identified he, Siddhartha Gautama, now Shakyamuni, the Buddha, as though he was the originator and manifester of this knowledge of Buddha. But he wasn't. He's just somebody who keyed into it, observed it, understood it, and spent the rest of his life trying to teach everyone else how to do the same thing. But people hang on to thingness. So the statement being, after Shakyamuni dies, Buddha will be gone. No. Buddha is in our minds. It never was Shakyamuni who brought this enlightenment. It was enlightenment as a tool for all of us to understand, embodied in the person of Siddhartha Gautama, who had spent years investigating his own mind in order to experience it. He didn't make it up on the spot. He didn't say, well, here I'll invent a religion or whatever you want to call it that will answer everybody's questions. No, he simply found the fundamental truth that we all have within it, that we're all manifested from. The same thing. We're no different. So to say that we're all Buddhas kind of misses the point, because Buddha is the awakening to this condition of life. So this is what the confusing language of awakening Buddha, and I call it Buddha-ness, is because it's not strictly yours. Your path, your gohonzon of opening that door, that's yours. And the wisdom that you get from understanding that situation is your Buddha wisdom. But there's no Excalibur Buddha or Sylvain Buddha. There's Sylvain's path to Buddha. There's John's path to Buddha. There's, right? So on and so forth. There's Tammy's path to Buddha. All of us has a path, right? That path is forged how? It's not something you trip over. It's something you're mentally constructing or deconstructing. This is why study is so valuable. So let's continue. And in the 11th chapter, beholding the stupa of treasures, the treasure tower, right, which is our own minds, the Buddha of many treasures and Buddhas in manifestation from all over the worlds of the entire universe gathered together to make this Dharma live forever. Buddhas in manifestation should remember my Buddha's intention to keep on spreading the Dharma forever. So if we expect a world of cooperation, of respect and dignity, then the more people we clue in to the very nature of what life is, the more we accomplish that. Look, relax. Don't be so worried. At the same time, we're in samsara, so we do worry about people who are unenlightened, ignorant. They're the war hawks. They're the people of violence. They're the people of trying to answer their problems as though affecting their environments will change life. Well, it may annihilate many humans, but life is unaffected. Right? We have to get the ego out of there. It's causing all the trouble. You may find similar statements in the 13th chapter, the encouragement for keeping this sutra, and the 14th chapter, peaceful practices. They show that the theoretical section of the Lotus Sutra is directed to those in the beginning of the latter age. In other words, those like you and I with the capacity to get the big aha moment about this. How critical it is that not only we ourselves awaken to the true nature of life, but that we influence everyone around us, because that's our life as well. And we need to take that seriously, because without it, we become very insular and we leave the train again. We become isolated, and then that's another place for the ego to fester and make us our own victims of attachment, our attachment to something other. Primary problem, yeah? Speaking of the essential section of the Lotus Sutra, it is preached solely for those living in the beginning of the latter age. Because this wouldn't reach the people of prior epochs. They just weren't equipped to understand this. At first glance, it appears that the seed of Buddhahood was planted in them by the eternal Buddha in the eternal past, or 500 dust particle kalpas ago. You see how the rhetoric can get confusing? You understand now that this wasn't something that from without that was planted in time without beginning. This is the very nature of the process since time without beginning. Right? That condition, that formation, was something resulting from its own interactions, whether arising or not. The seed germinated and grew within them and helped them, and the help of all the sutras from the Lotus Sutra, preached by the 16th prince of the great universal wisdom, 3,000 dust particle kalpas in the past, to all those preached by Shakyamuni Buddha in this life before the Lotus Sutra and the theoretical section of the Lotus Sutra. Finally, the essential section of the Lotus Sutra enabled them to attain enlightenment. Who is he talking about? Were there people roaming around in the incredibly hot plasma of the Big Bang? Good question. A lot of you may have said, well, of course, there weren't even planets or stars then. How could there be people? But the fact of the matter is, if you understand the energetic formations, incalculable as they are, that come together to manifest this whole universe as well as your body, and therefore emerge the consciousnesses, all 9 of them, along with Buddhahood, because that's the first consciousness, really, right? What I was describing earlier, this amalgam, as soon as it arises, is from a sort of selection process of these energies, yeah? So in a very real way, this thing we call a self or a body or a human or a samsaric apparatus, it was in that very first reaction of instantiation. Not a human per se, but the very thing of identification, tendencies, conditions, all of that is no different in its amazing amalgam than it is in its fundamental beginning. It's a continuous stream, moment to moment, moment to moment, moment. We talk about the birth of the universe, don't we? And the eventual death and extinction of the universe, don't we? Well, you and I are that universe, just as the universe is the universe. There's no difference. That's the most difficult thing to grapple with, isn't it? To think different from that, to think, but I am not the same as the universe, is identifying the exact problematic that Shakyamuni identified as precipitating all of suffering or confusion or anxiety or stress. Because the moment we identify self from other, we put an enormous pressure, the pressure of the entire universe, on our poor little shoulders. Because what if I don't do this? What if I do that? You are in every single moment doing. The only question is, what are you influencing that doing to do? Accrue more identification? You're already there. This is the conundrum of enlightenment, isn't it? When you realize that the entirety of the universe is your universe, my universe, their universe, that identifier of me, you, there is excessive. It's in the way. It's ego. Simply be in the totality of it. That's so enormous, I don't even know how to behave. And yet, in that enormity, if we just settle into it, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, we feel an expanse, almost physical. We can feel the tingling of the realization of the constant momentum that our collection of energy within the collection of energies is swimming through, moving. And then there's nothing being severed between us and everything else until we start using words like us and everything else. The idea of other is the primary illusion. Wow, what are we doing? Language just falls apart here. And yet, we're entitled somehow to our own consciousness of that very reality. So we never leave samsara. We simply utilize it in a much more factually, truthfully based experience. And that, you can say, is an experience that is filtered, as it is, through the uncountable karmic energies manifesting this particular you and I apparatus. And that's kind of entertaining. But it doesn't possess anything other than its kinetic flow, its momentum. Be in that momentum. Influence those around you to be in that momentum with you, to show you theirs. How incredible, yeah? Finally, the essential section of the Lotus Sutra enabled them to attain Buddhahood. Them. Humans, minds. On closer examination, however, the essential section differs from the theoretical section. That is to say, the essential section, all through the preface, the main discourse, and the epilogue, was preached for those people in the beginning of the latter day of the generation, our time. The teaching of the essential section during the lifetime of Shakyamuni Buddha, and that which would spread in the beginning of the latter age, are likewise absolutely perfect. However, the former is for attaining enlightenment, whereas the latter is for sowing the seed of Buddhahood. So one has a future attainment, and this is why early teachings all seem to have an endurance of time to them, in a future life, right? All of that rhetoric, which I've already explained, is moment to moment, but the way it was taught was for the people's capacity, who couldn't conceive of changing their mind into Buddha, because they couldn't conceive of Buddha-ness being something that the human mind was capable of achieving. So we had to give them a carrot to work toward, still affecting positively and affirming life. But it's not until the Lotus Sutra where, okay, you're ready, knock, knock, knock. This is inherent. This is already what you're manifest from. Just look at it. Well, I can do that? Yes, you can. Invoke it. How do I invoke it? Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu, me, samsaric me, opening my mind, Gohonzon, to Myoho Renge Kyo. Wow, the expanse of the whole thing. While the former is crystallized in the 16th chapter, when Shakyamuni says, look, you all think that me, the human, attained this great other thing called Buddha, but Buddha's been around since time without beginning. It's just a matter of you perceiving Buddha. That was the lifespan of the Tathagata chapter. He synthesized the whole thing in one chapter. The duration of the life of the Tathagata, with half a chapter each preceding and following it, the latter is solely embodied in the 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo. Your attainment of Buddhahood, your awakening, your shift of perception to Buddhahood. The title of the Lotus Sutra. That's what this is all about. Question: do you have a scriptural proof for that? Man, what do you think he's been talking about? But, okay, I guess he has to identify this persistent question. People are stubborn and don't want to hear what he's saying, right? Answer: the 15th chapter, appearance of bodhisattvas from underground states, which I've explained. That's a future bodhisattvas, right? Growing from seeds and blossoming into you and I. Thereupon numerous bodhisattvas, 8 times the number of grains of sands in the Ganges River, who had come from other worlds, future, rose among the masses, pressed hands together in Gosho, bowed to the Buddha and said, quote, "World-honored one, if you permit us to exert ourselves to uphold, read, recite, copy this sutra, and make offerings to it in this world of endurance, right? Arising, endurance, and dissolution, the Saha world, after your death, your extinction, we will expound it widely. This is the vow that we're constantly reminded of. Don't forget your vow. To carry our Buddha mind throughout our daily lives, to influence others, right? Thereupon the Buddha said to the numerous bodhisattvas, "No, good men, I do not want you to uphold this sutra," so on and so forth. This differs fundamentally, like water and fire, from what was stated in the 10th chapter, the teacher of the Dharma, and the following 4 chapters, which comprise the epilogue of the theoretical sections. Towards the end of the 11th chapter, beholding the stupa of treasures, once again, it states, with a loud voice, the Buddha addressed monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, asking who will preach the Lotus Sutra widely in this world, end quote. Just checking the time. Even if this exhortation had been made by the Buddha alone, such great bodhisattvas as Medicine King, the king of the Brahma heaven, Indra, sun god, moon god, 4 heavenly kings, all those personages would have taken it seriously. The Buddha of many treasures and various Buddhas from all over the world in the universe, the potential for this consciousness, enlightenment, joined in his exhortation. Having heard their courteous appeal, those bodhisattvas vowed, "We will not spare our lives in doing so." It was solely to comply with the will of the Buddha. Soon afterwards, however, the Buddha changed his intention and stopped those numerous bodhisattvas, 8 times the number of grains of sand in the Ganges River, from propagating this sutra in the world. They were in a quandary. This is beyond the comprehension of ordinary man. The time was not yet ripe. Grandmaster Tendai explained it with 6 interpretations, 3 explaining why the Buddha dissuaded those numerous bodhisattvas from spreading this sutra in the world after his death, and 3 to explain why he waited for the bodhisattvas to appear from underground. After all, Shakyamuni Buddha could not reveal his innermost enlightenment or the great Dharma hidden in the lines of the duration of the life of the Tathagata chapter to those great bodhisattvas from other worlds who had been guided by the teaching of the theoretical section. At the beginning of the latter age, there are lands where the true Dharma is slandered, and those who live there have poor capacity for comprehension and conviction in Buddhism. Yeah, look at the world. Therefore, instead of relying on bodhisattvas from other worlds, the Buddha called out great bodhisattvas from underground to entrust them with the task of transmitting the 5 characters Myoho Renge Kyo. And the essence of the duration of the life of the Tathagata chapter to the people in this world. It was also because those guided by the teaching of the theoretical section were not the original disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha, because this was a contemporaneous sermon to the people of his day. So he was setting up for the future that these bodhisattvas would have the capacity for people with the capacity to understand what they were teaching. As for entrusting the task to bodhisattvas from underground, Grandmaster Tendai states in his words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, quote, "These have been my, Shakyamuni's, disciples since time in the eternal past, and it is they who should propagate the Dharma." So again, this language is describing what I was earlier, is that you and I, our manifestation in this life process of the universe is at a time where we have the capacity to understand that all of the energies that comprise this human existence, this physical, samsaric universe life all existed at the first moment of instantiation of this vast potential that is this universe. They couldn't conceive of that then, 3,000 years ago. It's raining, in case you're hearing this odd staticky white noise behind me. Oh, and maybe some thunder. Grandmaster Miao Lo says of this in his annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, quote, "It will be the joy of the world for a child to propagate his father's dharma." And Dao Xian, supplement to the annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, speaking of that document from Miao Lo, quote, "Because it was the dharma preached by the eternal Buddha in the eternal past, the task of spreading it was entrusted to those who received his guidance in the eternal past." Another way of alluding to the fact that this has always been the nature of the entirety of the process of life, observed by us physically with this emergent mind. Yeah? Moreover, it is said in the 15th chapter, Appearance of Bodhisattvas from Underground, that's us, that Bodhisattva Maitreya begged the Buddha to clear his doubts about his original disciples from the eternal past, saying, quote, "We have never doubted the truthfulness of your auspicious sermons or the words uttered by you." Again, identifying the man instead of the Buddha-ness of the man, although... "And we believe that you know all things thoroughly." Know being the operative term there. How do we know something? As human beings, how do we know something? It's a cataloging of experience, right? So how we experience is everything. If we experience through the filter of ownership, then we're locked in samsara, right? With all of its stresses and anxieties. But if we know through our experience of being a component of a huge system of life, that we are privileged to simply observe in its process, free from isolating attachments, self and other, that kind of stress, that is what is known when he says, "You know all things thoroughly," to its fundament, yeah? "We are afraid, however, that those who have just begun to walk the Bodhisattva way, if they hear these words of yours after your death, if you're not here to validate it, you Shakyamuni, they might not accept them in conviction, causing the sin of destroying the Dharma." Because if you're ignorant of it, you actually walk all over it and don't even know that you're disparaging this great insight. "We beseech you, world-honored one, to explain this to remove our doubts. Good men in the future, too, will have no doubts when they hear it." So their confidence is waning. When our leader is gone, they still haven't grasped the idea that the leader is Buddha, not Shakyamuni, but Buddha within and without. It's the same thing. If you just shift your mind. See, that very question is based on self and other again. The very problem Shakyamuni's exhaustively tried to get them to recognize. Nichiren goes on, "This passage shows that the preaching of the chapter, the duration of the life of the, or lifespan of the Tathagata, was requested for the sake of the people after the death of Shakyamuni Buddha." So this had to follow later on. And why would it have to follow later on? Because the people's capacity need to evolve to a stage or a state where this perception was perceivable to them, to us. The duration of the lifespan chapter says, quote, having taken poison, some had lost their senses while others had not. Seeing this excellent medicine with good color and good scent, those who had not lost their senses took it and recovered from their illness. The medicine is Myoho Renge-kyo. There are many who are poisoned with all sorts of phantasms and mysticism and so forth, and they not only don't get it, they actively resist getting it. That is the sin against the Dharma. They get in their own way of realization. This refers to the capacity of all those who receive the seed of Buddhahood in the eternal past as preached in the duration of the life of the Tathagata chapter, those who had the opportunity to establish a connection with the Buddha Dharma at the time of great universal wisdom Buddha as revealed in the 7th chapter. The parable of a magic city and all those bodhisattvas, 2 vehicles, Shravaka and Prataka Buddha, men and gods who received the teaching of the Buddha in the pre-Lotus Sutra as well as the theoretical section of the Lotus Sutra to attain Buddhahood in the preaching of the essential section. It is said in the same chapter, quote, the remainder who had lost their senses were happy to see their father come back, remember the physician and his sons, and requested him to cure their illness, but they refused to take the medicine their father offered them. Why did they not take it? It was because they had been affected by the poison, causing them to lose their senses and think that this excellent medicine in both color and scent was not good at all. You see how they worked against their own enlightenment because their confidence was completely obliterated. They couldn't get past their own ego. Quote, now I have to devise an expedient means so that they take this medicine, thought the father. What did he do? Now I will leave this excellent medicine here with you. You should take it without worrying about its effectiveness, instructed the father to his children, and then he again went abroad. Then he sent a messenger back to his children, telling them that their father had passed away. Ah, interesting. An analogy of the Buddha passing away. Hoping that in this situation, his sons, distraught over the passing away of their father, Shakyamuni, that they either would accept the medicine as truthful or take it thinking that they wanted to join their father in death. This medicine still, I don't believe it, is bad. So I'm going to take it so I can die along with my dad. And conversely, get better, are healed. Oh my goodness. I should have done this all along. Why didn't I believe in my father? And then, of course, he shows up and they're overjoyed, right? But the things we have to do to blast the ego out of the way, in this case, we use the ego against itself. Not easily done. The 17th chapter, Variety of Merits, in the essential section of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, in the evil age of the latter Dharma, so on and so forth, indicating that the teaching was for the latter age of degeneration, because that is the world that we live in today. It's just poisoned minds, if you want to use the rhetoric we just read. And we're going to stop there, and we're going to start up again with Chapter 7, Propagators of the Lotus Sutra in the Latter Age. That's you and me. So I'm curious to see what Nichiren says in this next part. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, for joining along. If you got any insights from this, let me know in the comments. Let the Sangha know, right? I've noticed from analytics, and a lot of YouTube people are saying this now, that more than half of the people who watch these videos consistently are not subscribed, please subscribe. Just because you subscribe doesn't mean you now have given over your life to this channel, that you have to watch every single video. There are hundreds on this channel. It simply means that you support what we're doing, that you appreciate that we're trying to understand fully the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, Lotus Sutra practice, Nichiren's doctrine and insights into the practice of Lotus Sutra Buddhism. And for that, for all of us, I deeply appreciate your commitment. It doesn't take much to subscribe. I'm not saying you have to click the bell icon so that you're constantly notified. I get sick of notifications, so I totally get that. But your subscription simply says, this is a valuable resource. For me at times, but certainly for others, let's keep that going. And that's a great deal of support for us, using the algorithms of YouTube. That's, that's just part of the way we communicate now, right? So please subscribe. And if you like this video, like it. If you didn't, And I know it takes time to make comments, and sometimes things will come to you later on. A lot of things happen as I go to bed at night, and I sit there and my mind is roiling through things, and I start getting little insights here and there, or I wake up in the morning with insights. Write them down, and if not in the comments, send them to my email, tlksylvain@gmail.com. Well, let's keep the dialogue going, right? This life is utterly astounding. Let's get every nook and cranny of it, okay? You guys are amazing. My patrons from Patreon and those who do it separately directly through paypal.me/SifuSylvain. You guys, awesome, awesome, awesome. That's next level support. And you guys are awesome. I'm so proud of all of you, especially if you've been through, this is what, 50 minutes? I know these can get long, but I want to have a complete thought. I don't just want to be a mimetic that gets repeated, right? There's not a lot of value in that. It has to be understood. It has to open a door. And in that vein, the audio podcasts are available for free. Just download them. And you can listen at your leisure while you're doing something else. Hopefully I garner a little more attention to that, but not always. That's okay. And with all that abundant appreciation for you guys participating, I look forward to seeing you in the next one, okay? So thanks for listening. Please take care of your health. With everything considered in these days, it's important for us to remind ourselves to be kind to ourselves. It's hard to be kind to anyone else if we're beating ourselves up, yeah? So please be kind to yourself, take care of your health, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.